The next person that we bring up to the floor is a man without whom this entire thing would not be possible. And the one whom, every time he gets up on this stage, I am not worthy. I am not worthy. And his name is the incomparable Marcus Ellsworth.
I'm not worthy.
I hope I can live up to that introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Marcus Ellsworth. You might know me as your bartender for the evening. So, we hit intermission. Come see me. I'll hook you up. But only if you applaud. If you don't like this, then I'm gonna overcharge you. You might tip in that fee. This is the Christmas season, and I've been getting up here the past few months telling stories. So let's do that, shall we? Thinking about this time of year and the importance it has for so many people, the strong emotions, good, bad, and otherwise, I thought it would be appropriate to tell you all about the Christmas that I thought I wouldn't have my family. You see, I was still a college student over at UTC, and I had been out as a gay man for a few years, just among friends and a few teachers who I trusted, but not my own family, because I was afraid. See, I was raised Catholic, and the church and queer folks don't exactly have a great history together. So I didn't know how my family would react. I mean, yes, my parents are Catholic, but they always go Democrat. They have gay friends, but they never really talked about how they felt about it. So I thought, here I was a sophomore in college, and it was time to come out to my mom, because I'd been part of Spectrum, the UTC's Gay Straight Alliance. I'd been to rallies and protests. I had found my identity, and I was confident that this is who I am, and I was happy. So I worked up the nerve to tell her over Thanksgiving. I was going to wait until the day after, at least get through the meal. I wasn't going to do it in front of the whole family and have one of those scenes from those terrible Lifetime movies. But sitting at the table with my family, with my brothers and my sister and my nephews, I got scared that I wouldn't get to have this again. And I got more scared of what she would say in case she didn't have a good response. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to see her face. So I did the only thing I knew how to do at the time, and I wrote my feelings down. An old habit that I have yet to break. And I left her a letter. I handed it to her on my way out the door to go meet up with some friends, and I said, "Here, Ma, read this." I went out with my friends for the rest of the day, and I waited. I waited for her to call me. And my friends knew I planned to tell her, but they didn't know I had already given the letter to her. So when she finally did call, all she said was, "You need to come home. We need to talk." That's when I let my friends know that I had given her the letter. They asked me if I wanted them to come to the house with me, and I said no. This is something I have to do. So I get back to my parents' house, and I walk in, and my mom looks at me, and she says, "Let's go get some ice cream." Now for my mother, this is code, an old code for we need to talk. Ever since I was a kid, whenever she wanted to have a serious discussion, she'd say, "Let's go get ice cream." And we'd get in the car, and the whole ride to the ice cream shop and back would be very intense, to say the least. It's how she knew she had a captive audience, because who's going to say no to ice cream? And so I looked at her and I said, yeah, Mom, let's go get ice cream. And so we got into her white SUV and we sat there. My dad looked at us, he goes, oh, where y'all going? We're like, ice cream, it'll be fun. You want anything? We never left the driveway. As soon as we got in the car, my mother looked at me and she said, so I read your letter. And I said, yeah? What'd you think? And she looked at me and said, are you sure? That's a hard life. And I said, yeah, I know. And then she asked if I'd ever been with a woman, and I said, yeah, but that's not the point. And then she said, what about AIDS? You could die from AIDS. And I was like, so can straight people. So do straight people. That's not the point. And then she said, I just want you to be happy. And she was crying. And I told her, I'm going to be happy. And then she said that she had this dream. She had this dream one night where she saw my soul. And she saw her soul. Because she had suspected that her child might be gay. When she thought about that, she watched her own soul break in two and mine fade to darkness. And she said that's what she was afraid of. She asked me if I could change, and I said no. She asked me if maybe I just didn't know for sure, maybe if I met the right woman. I said no. She said she didn't want to lose me, and I said I don't want to lose you. And it just felt like we kept stabbing these knives that were intended to be words of love into each other over and over again. And she was crying, and I was crying, and we were just sitting there in the car. And the back door of the house opened, and my dad stuck his head out, and my mother, and me being my mother's child, we both quickly ducked down behind the dashboard, wiped the tears from our eyes, popped up, smiled, and said, yeah? And he looked, cocked his head to the side and said, y'all know it's been almost a half hour. You ain't gonna find no ice cream in that car. And we told him we changed our minds and we'd be in a moment. He went back inside and we went back to this strange sparring match. Just cutting each other, but not meaning to. At one point, I must have texted my friends and said that I needed them because they showed up. And they tapped on the window next to me, and I still remember Aaron and Keith and how they looked at me and how they looked at my mother. A woman whose home had always been open to them. A woman whose love seemed endless and boundless and unconditional, not even just for her own children, but for anyone who showed up at her door. And here, for the first time in my life, it was being taken away. I told Mom I was getting out of the car, that I was going with them. And she looked at me and reflexively she said, if those boys are hungry, you let me feed them. At that moment, I didn't know if I was coming back to that house, let alone my friends. And so I left with them, and I didn't go back to my parents' house except for the day I had to come back to Chattanooga to pick up my car and say goodbye. And I really thought that Thanksgiving would be the last holiday I'd have with my family. But I was fortunate. It was a long road, but me and my mother worked things out. When I came out to my father, his response was, yeah, and I'm hungry, let's go eat. sister-in-law, all supportive. My boyfriend now is part of the family. And my mother has apologized in so many ways and in so many words since then. And she's happy. And I'm happy. But my story, the ending of this story, the opening of that chapter, doesn't always play out that way. I'm among the fortunate few. Because see, this year, this Christmas, there are plenty of young men and young women, boys and girls, who've been kicked out by their families. Some are lucky enough to have other relatives who take them in, but too many of them are just out there right now in the cold. Some of them right here in Chattanooga tonight. Because them or they came out looking for love and acceptance and instead got a door slammed in their face. And we want to talk about goodwill. We want to talk about what it means to be a good person. We talk about family, we talk about love. And yet there are those who claim that the very reason for this season is the reason that they kicked out their child. LGBT youth make up a disproportionate amount of the young people living on the streets. The most common reason that they've been kicked out on the streets is because they come from a religious household. How can you possibly sit down to Christmas dinner and leave an empty chair? But too many do. And too many of us sit by quietly and let it happen. We don't stand up for those kids. We don't swear that they will have a good Christmas again, that one year they will be able to sit down and smile and eat and sing and be aggravated by their relatives like everyone should be. Instead, they're busy doing anything to survive. And I wish I had an answer for you. The only thing I can ask you to do is, this season, every season, really love the people in your life. Really love your family, even if it does break your soul.